Hello, everybody. Welcome to Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. We're also streaming on Facebook Live right now from a terrace in downtown Los Angeles at our hotel. I apologize for the sun. Couldn't really do anything about that.
You didn't put the sun up there. It's not really your
I did
fault.
not. Thank you. So here we are, one day away from the Rose Bowl. We're going to just do the show tomorrow, but there's been quite a bit of news and quotes this past week. We have talking to players almost every day, coaches almost every day. When I'm trying to think of everything that was said, I keep going back to Tate Martell, which, come on, no surprise there. And, we finally got to talk to him because we did not get to talk to him at the Big Ten Championship game. And he was asked about, Justin Fields and his thoughts, and basically everything that we've said is in terms of they need a fourth quarterback. That's also what Tate Martell said. Like, they can go get whoever they want. We need quarterbacks. But he was adamant that nobody is going to come in and just win this job right out of the gate because the offense is too difficult to learn. But the most impressive quote was about how, he's been busting his ass for 2 years, and nobody who hasn't put in like 1 second of time with Mickey Marotti or Ryan Day or whatever is going to take this job. And Tom, what was his percentage of surety that he would be the starting quarterback next year?
It was somewhere between 99 and 101.
Yeah, you're right. It was 100%. And that's exactly what you want to see from Tate Martell, right? I mean, not only does it show you the confidence, it gives fans reassurance that he has no intention of going anywhere.
No, and he very specifically said he is not going to transfer just because some other quarterback shows up. So, from an Ohio State perspective, that's exactly what you want, because if you bring in a quarterback and then lose a quarterback, that doesn't actually solve your, hey, we're one quarterback short problem. So, in an open competition between the two of those guys, I think probably there's an argument to be made that Fields is physically more gifted than Martell in some ways, but having a 2-year head start on learning the offense, knowing the personnel, knowing the systems, knowing just the school and everything, all the other stuff that you never think about with players, he's got a 2-year head start. That's a huge deal. That actually makes a pretty big difference. So I think that if you have an open competition between those two guys, those are two pretty good quarterbacks, and Matthew Baldwin is a pretty good quarterback too, with a little bit of a different mold. But if you have 3 good, solid, very highly ranked quarterbacks fighting it out for a job, that is generally a fight that will end with you having a pretty good quarterback starting for you in the fall.
It would be interesting, and we're talking like Justin Fields is coming, to Ohio State, how they would divvy up those reps in spring. Because you want to give him a shot, but in order to give him a shot, you probably can't go 1/3 of the snaps. Does he need half of them? And if he's getting more than other players, are those players then getting upset? But still, from the sounds of it, like Tate Martell, if there's no, we didn't have video, but the amount of confidence that he had that, like, it doesn't matter who. Like, Peyton Manning's not going to come in, 18-year-old Peyton Manning come in and win this job because he said it's an NFL type of offense. And he talked to Dwayne Haskins about it, and Dwayne said he didn't really feel comfortable until, at least his second year doing it. And that's where Tate is now. He says he runs the entire offense. He's comfortable with it. And there's no way somebody's going to come in, Justin Fields or whomever, and take this job. But I think it's reassuring for everybody involved that, like Joe Burrow last year, even actually it was this year, was like, transferring is a possibility. We're thinking about it. And Tate Martell's like, no, that's my job. Why would I leave when I'm finally, and why would he leave when the job is finally going to be handed down to him as long as he does what he expects to do?
Yeah, and I think that there is a reason to think he's probably the favorite going into next year because he's had that extra year in the system above Baldwin, 2 years above what Fields would have, presumably coming in. I think he's right to think that he should be the front runner for the job. It's not his job, and really, it's not 100% his job. He's not right about that. But you want your quarterback to have a little bit of arrogance, a little bit of take charge. This is my team. This is is my time. You don't want a meek, mild quarterback who's not who just whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, that's the guy who's
come in and take my lunch money.
Yeah, that's your number 4 quarterback, not your number 1 quarterback.
It is fascinating to me that the two most whip your head around quotes this week have both been about a guy who's playing quarterback in a different bowl game on New Year's Day. Because there was the Martell quotes, you were there for those, and then there was Dwayne Haskins earlier. This was, I believe, I'm almost positive this was after we recorded our last podcast, but before. It feels like we've been here for a month, and it's been every day's just been something else, just crazy busy. But Haskins just came right out and said, "Oh yeah, I've messaged with Justin Fields about, he wanted to know about whether I'm sticking around next year and whether I was planning on staying," which certainly is suggestive to me of if Dwayne Haskins stays, Justin Fields would not want to come here because he would not have an open starting quarterback job. If Dwayne Haskins goes, it sure suggests that Justin Fields is strongly leaning towards Ohio State.
Yeah, and there's no way Ryan Day is going to tell Justin Fields, Tate Martell is our guy.
Right.
Because he doesn't know. He may assume it, but the quarterback battle is always going to be a competition. Mm-hmm. It's always up for grabs. They say every job is always up for grabs. And I know people still don't believe that when you look at J.T. Barrett and Dwayne Haskins last season. But if you perform well in practice, they'll find a place for you. And so there will be no promises made to Tate Martell other than the fact that, you will have every opportunity, just like Matthew Baldwin will, just like Justin Fields may, just like Chris Chugginoff, even Chris Chugginoff. Go back to 1996. Joe Germain was an afterthought because it was Stanley Jackson, Mark Garcia. Those were the two guys.
Yep.
And throughout practice, you keep hearing about this Joe Germain kid. And then you guys, you may remember the guy. You may remember his name. But if you perform in practice, then you'll play.
And then you're winning the Rose Bowl. So, that's... We're
here. We are.
Tied it all together.
Dwayne Haskins' last game, probably. I think we all assume it. I don't even know how you put it into words. We were talking yesterday, maybe me and you. I can't believe we're watching an Ohio State quarterback approach 5,000 yards passing. That's something that you see in the Big 12 with Texas Tech, but we also saw it with Oklahoma and when Kevin Wilson was there, where they threw the ball. But is this going to be the norm? I don't think it can be the norm, though, because Dwayne Haskins is not the norm.
Right.
I think they'll throw the ball more than they have under Urban Meyer, but I don't expect, could we see 3,800 yards next year would be totally understandable, totally, that's fine. I don't expect another 4,800 or whatever he's going to end up with.
Well, 3,800 yards, to use your number, that would be 500 yards more than what the school record was at the beginning of this year. That was, bring it back to Joe Germain again. It was Joe Germain, 1998, 3,330 yards. That was Joe Germain's 1998. That was, until this fall, that was Ohio State's all-time single-season passing yardage record. So to have it be just 3,800 yards, that's already so far above anything that has happened at Ohio State in the passing game ever before. Haskins is 420 yards away from hitting the 5,000-yard mark. So he could, if he throws for 420 yards and 3 touchdowns, he will have thrown for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns this year. That is, those are Texas Tech numbers.
Right.
For that to happen at Ohio State, I'll have to go look at where just this year's numbers would rank him on the career list. Not even include last year's, because he's already pretty high on a lot of those career lists, just from last year plus this year. Just this year, 50 touchdowns. That's probably, just off the top of my head, that's probably second, third all time in Ohio State history, easily, just in one season. Yeah. That's just insane.
Well, you go back 30 years ago, like Greg Fry was the first Ohio State quarterback to have 3 2,000-yard passing seasons in his career. So I would assume at one point he was the all-time leading passer with maybe 65, 100 yards, 7,000 yards, and you're 2,000 yards short of that. That's probably top 13, 14 all-time in a career, all-time at least.
I think, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I know he's top 15 in some career number.
Yeah,
it might be he might be top 15 in career passing yardage already. I think that was one of those numbers, because I do that record tracking thing.
And when he throws for 270 yards, we're like, what's wrong?
Well, I hope he does better in the second half.
What do you expect in this game? Because we know Washington's pass defense is good. They've given up 9 touchdown passes this year. I think they have 11 interceptions. But going through, they don't play very many good passing offenses. And the best passing offense they played, Washington State, was in a snowstorm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I know they haven't seen anything like Ohio State. The defensive coordinator told me they have not seen anything like Dwayne Haskins. So when you look at what they've done, which is really good, like number 4 scoring defense in the nation at 15.5 points per game, but I think that's skewed quite a bit by the teams they've faced. I think Dwayne Haskins will be fine. I wonder, this might be a pretty stiff test for the receivers, though.
Yeah, this is going to be one of the tougher defenses Ohio State's played all year. And, I mean, we saw what happened the last time they played what was at the time the number 1 ranked defense in the country. And that,
what happened?
I think they scored 62 points. I would have to go back and look it up.
Right.
Because that can't possibly be right.
Let me Google that.
Okay. While you're looking that up, I think it's reasonable to think that they will do better against Washington than anyone else has at any point this year. No team has scored more than 24 points against Washington in regulation. The only team to do better than that was Oregon, and that took overtime to get to 30. Our score predictions went up, and now I've completely forgotten what I actually predicted because I wrote it yesterday, but it was 34-20 or something like that.
No, that was mine. You were like 31-17.
31-17.
Like
I mean, something in that range. If Ohio State scores 31 points tomorrow, that's a heck of a day.
Yeah.
Like, that's a good day against a pretty good defense. I've seen a lot of people picking like in the 40s and 50s, not necessarily in our staff picks, but just people on Twitter predicting 40s and 50s. And sure, it's possible, and maybe they really are just a complete paper tiger, and we'll find that out. But I think this is going to be a pretty decent test for this Ohio State offense, and for those receivers to have a chance to put some pretty good reps on film, because they're pretty much all going pro.
Yeah, well, and the most important thing is for Paris Campbell to get his 8 yards receiving, to get his 1,000 yards for the season. Even if they don't win and they get that, it's a successful season in my book.
Someone else, and I think it might be Terry McLaurin, needs like 150 something yards to get to 1,000 as well. So, and then Mike Weber needs like 150 something. Yeah. So they could theoretically have a 5,000 yard quarterback, 2 1,000 yard running backs, and 2 1,000 yard receivers. Like, that would be a big day at the Rose Bowl. 420 yards passing for Haskins and 150 yards on the ground for Weber, plus a lot of it has to go to McLaurin. Yeah. But that's not like impossible. And to have any of that, Ohio State has never had 2,000 yard rushers, running backs in the same season.
Did Pete Johnson and Archie Griffin once?
Did they?
Like
74 might be right. Yeah, you might be right. So once in history, I don't think they threw for 5,000 yards here in 1974 or 75, whatever year that was. I'm pretty sure, without looking it up.
Well, you take that gamble then. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to say that.
Yeah, it's just, this has been, it's been such a weird season. Like, it's been a weird season just narrative-wise. Just the stuff we've spent a lot of time talking about this fall has been not football stuff. And then you look at what they've done offensively, and then you look back at what the reaction was all fall. It was like, it's just another kind of flat, kind of disappointing season, and this has just been so far above and beyond anything we've ever seen, remotely anything like this.
Before the season started, we're sitting at the alumni house, waiting for the Urban Meyer verdict. Now we're here, 10 miles from the Rose Bowl. It's been a heck of a year. Still not over yet. There's still a lot to be done. Like you said, the numbers. David Boston and D. Miller in 98, 90. They had like 1,000 yards and maybe like 980 something.
It was like 9. I think D. Miller had 981 yards.
Yeah, so they almost did it, the 2,000 yards. Then I don't expect it to happen this year, but we're asking for something that they've already done. Like it's not like you're asking each of these players to do something you haven't done.
Right.
Haskins has thrown for 420. Weber has rushed for 186, I think was the season opener.
Yeah, against Oregon State.
And
Yep.
Terry McLaurin has had a big day as well. So, it's possible. It would be neat to see. Which do you think is the most likely? Haskins goes for 5,000, Weber goes for 1,000, and McLaurin goes for 1,000. Because that's a tough. Maybe I might go with Weber just on a couple of long runs or something.
Yeah, I think it's either Weber or Haskins, because McLaurin is not necessarily the guy that you would expect to have, 150-yard day. It feels like he's never the 12 catch guy. He hits a couple big ones.
Right.
But you hit him on a 9 route against Wisconsin, and then he's got a 70-yard touchdown, and then he finishes with 81 yards. Like it's like he has not had that kind of game yet. He has not had the Johnny Dixon, Paris Campbell kind of 3 touchdown kind of game. That has just not been how he's played. But I guess I'll go with, if you're taking Weber, I guess I'll go with Haskins, because we've seen him do 420 yards a bunch of times.
But you just said Washington's defense was awesome.
I mean, we just said this is not. None of these things are like super likely to happen, but they're all within the realm of possibility, which is, I mean, any of these would have been mind blowing. Because I remember at the beginning of the year we were talking about over unders for Dwayne Haskins' passing stats. He passed all those at like Halloween. Like I think our over under on passing yards was like 3,500, and he's.
We both went over, so maybe it wasn't set so well.
Yeah. Well, who sets those?
I don't recall. It's been a long season. Remember when we started this season at the Alumni House?
Yeah. We're a long way from the loading dock.
I got nothing after that, Tom. The Ohio State defense has had a lot of time to study the Washington offense, to study themselves, figure out what's been wrong, figure out the best way to make everything right. Will that happen? How much faith do you have that everybody will be put in the proper position to succeed?
I would say that most of the faith that I have that the Ohio State defense is not going to have like a terrible day is based on the fact that Washington has not been a particularly good big play team this year. Washington is actually a decent matchup just schematically and personnel-wise for Ohio State. You wrote an article this week comparing them to...
Was that this week?
Yeah.
It seems like so long ago.
Sometime in the last 5 months while we were out here, wrote an article comparing them to Michigan. And they don't do the shifts and motion and east-west running and fast little dudes. Most of the time it's Myles Gaskin. He's running between the tackles. This is one of those games where this is a tough Borland game where you get your Mike backer in there. You're going to be running between the tackles. The defensive line should be able to hold up reasonably well, keep those linebackers clean. And then if you're just running up, you're running up the A-gap and Tough Borland's there, if Tough Borland doesn't have to chase you, he's got a pretty good chance to bring you down. There are things he does well and things he doesn't. This is a team that seems like a game that he could have a good game against.
Well, and you wrote about Tough this week, about the season he's had, the recovery he's made. How healthy has he been this season?
Yeah, all season he's kind of poo-pooed all the questions and concerns about like how are you really doing? Because remember, he blew out his Achilles in the spring, and he came back ahead of what the normal medical timetable for that kind of injury is. And Urban Meyer all summer was saying, he's a fast healer. No one heals faster than Tough. He's just so he's so. I mean, it's going to sound ridiculous. He's so tough, but he gets out there fast. He had no concern at all that he was going to heal up. And then he got out there, and it's like he doesn't look quite right. Like all season, he just didn't look quite right. You'd see him chasing people in the open field, and they'd be running away from him, and that was not something you necessarily saw last year. So he has not wanted to really talk about this year. He opened up about it a little bit And basically, he didn't say, yes, it's affected me, but he said, well, with another off season and another, I think I'll be better, and there will be some progression there.
Yep.
So whether he hasn't said it affected him this year, but it sounds like it affected him this year. I mean, which is if you've watched him this year, that would have been your conclusion. I think.
And you see that a lot with things like that. It's the second year where they're finally back to, and they're also comfortable and they know that they're healthy. With the ACLs as well, where you finally feel comfortable doing all of the motions and the movements. So I think it was interesting that he has gotten a lot of criticism this year. I think we should expect a better Tuf Borland next year. Should expect better linebackers across the board next year. I think this is a chance for them to begin that process. I don't know how confident I am, other than the fact that it's Washington's offense and it sets up well for Ohio State, just like Michigan's offense does. So I think they're going to look pretty good. And I mentioned to you after the first time we saw the Washington offensive players, only like 4 of them, but how small they looked compared to, we see Ohio State players every day, and they just looked small comparatively. So it's one of those where I don't know if they have a first guy off the bus.
Yeah, I don't.
But Ohio State has about 40.
Yeah.
So just watch that. Maybe it might turn out to be one of those things where Ohio State's size and physicality is able to manhandle them up front. And if they can do that, then the game's over.
And Washington defensively plays a 3-man front, not a 4-man front. So you're going to have maybe even more of a size advantage there in the trenches on that side of the ball. So that it certainly seems like this is a kind of game where you might have a little bit of a feeling out process on both sides of the ball, but then that big Ohio State offensive line potentially can wear down that Washington front. They don't have the depth that Ohio State does, because their recruiting classes the last 4 years, I went back and looked it up, Ohio State's were like 7th, 5th, 2nd, and 2nd in the country. Washington's were like 27th, 25th, 22nd, 17th. Like there's one on one level, and there's one it's a level below. And I think it could be a little bit like the Cotton Bowl last year, where you have a team, last year it was USC, where they had good quarterback, good running backs, good skill talent, some good talent on defense, but there wasn't a lot of depth there, and you saw them just kind of wear down, and then in the second half, that offensive line basically fell apart, and that was the deciding factor in the game.
You saw that against TCU as well, where the Ohio State defensive line just eventually takes over. I think that will probably be the case here as well. We talked to not everybody, but most of the 2-deep yesterday was the media day. So we got to talk to the corners. First time we've ever talked to Kendall Sheffield, who said he's had a good season this year, is not thinking, doesn't know where his mindset is yet on the NFL. He told me he did not put his name in to the evaluation, which either means he doesn't care what the NFL says and he's leaving, or he doesn't think he's leaving, but we don't know where he is on that. Damon Arnett, same boat. He's not sure what he's going to do. I don't know that those guys, either one of those, I think Kendall Sheffield maybe more than Damon Arnett, but if those guys are 3-year starters, that's a bit of a recruiting fail in my book, because I don't know that they're getting better. They're as good as they were last year, and that's not good enough.
Yeah, they haven't gotten worse, but there hasn't been. I mean, before the year, we talked about every year there's an Ohio State corner that makes the leap, and it's whether it's Marshawn Lattimore, Garyon Conley, Denzel Ward. There's the one guy who goes from, he was okay, he was pretty solid, and then now he's a first-round NFL draft pick. No one did that this year, and I think we came into the year with the assumption that we don't know who it's going to be, but I mean it happens every year, so someone's going to do it, and then it didn't happen this year, and that's one of the issues. I mean, there are several issues on the defense, but the lack of a true number one shutdown corner is certainly one of those issues.
Well, and the plan was for them to leave for the NFL after this season, and I don't think either player had the year they expected or wanted to have, or that Ohio State wanted them to have. And not that they were terrible or anything, but that's not the standard. The standard is elite. It's Marshawn Lattimore, Denzel Ward, Bradley Roby, Garyon Conley, all of these guys, Eli Apple, and they haven't been to that level. And you wonder, will their presence keep Jeff Okudah, Shaun Wade from getting to that level? And I talked to Shaun Wade yesterday, and he doesn't know where he'll be next year. He misses corner, but he gets to do enough man coverage at safety and a nickel, so that's something. But he does miss corner. I would expect him to be back there, but I don't know if you put him back there, if those two are still there, and you still don't know what's going on at safety, because they really haven't solved their issue opposite Jordan Fuller, and there may be a bigger problem because Jordan Fuller may be headed for the NFL.
Yeah, you may need to keep Shaun Wade at safety, especially if Fuller goes, because it's Brendan White seems like
right.
Let's sort of patch the hole for now, and if that's a solution, and he kind of makes another step forward next year, that's a viable. You've kind of filled that spot. If it's not him and Fuller's not back, you've got Isaiah Pryor, who needs to make a big jump next year in order to be ready to make that kind of contribution.
Josh Proctor, I think, is who they would like.
Yeah, Josh Proctor is certainly.
Amir Reep is there.
Yeah, I mean, there's options there, but there were options there this year, and it took quite a while to find Brendan White, and
almost by accident.
Yeah, I mean, because it was only because Fuller got nailed for targeting, and then they were forced to throw Brendan White in, and then they kind of went, oh, hey, he's pretty good. Let's do this again.
So the safety topic gets me to Alex Grinch, and it gets to the assistant coaches that we talked to, and I think they were almost all of them were asked for their expectations for next year. Do you plan to be back? And we didn't ask Brian Hartline. no reason to ask Ryan Day. But most of the guys that were asked said that they wanted to be back or they expected to be back. Different guys had, it was phrased differently for different players, for different coaches. Some were like, yeah, I expect to be, and others were like, yeah, I hope to be, I want to be. Alex Grinch was asked, hey, can you answer whether or not you'll be here next year? And he said, I can't. I'm focused on the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
We got to win the Rose Bowl. And for me, for Alex Grinch is being mentioned as a defensive coordinator possibility for Oklahoma, when he's not even willing to answer anything about that, and you see everybody else freely answering it, that's a huge red flag for me.
Yeah, I had that thought because I walked up to him right as someone was asking him that question at Media Day, and he just said, I don't want to talk about that. And it was like, because everyone else has been basically on the same page, and it's not like there's a script they're reading off.
No.
They're all basically saying the same thing. And for someone to then not say that same thing is kind of telling, which is interesting because I think the widespread assumption at this point is that Greg Schiano will not be back, and that Grinch has been maybe a little bit frustrated about the fact that he may have come here expecting to be more of an equal, and maybe this has been more of a Greg Schiano defense than an Alex Grinch defense. So, and that would be completely reasonable for that to be a frustration and for that to be, a reason you might want to think about going somewhere else. But if Schiano's leaving and this would then be your show next year, you would think that would be enough to keep you around. But like you said, when he said that, I kind of whipped my head around a little bit. Like that was not what I expected him to say.
Well, and you've got like Kevin Wilson was asked about it, and he's like, he's had other calls because his contract is up in January, so he's had other calls and basically asked Ryan Day, like, should I listen to those people? And Ryan Day essentially told him, like, you don't have anything to worry about. So he expects to be back. We know Brian Hartline will be back. Taver Johnson, I think you talked to him, and he seemed like...
Yeah, he gave a big smile and said, I certainly plan to be back. And, it's... In a lot of these cases, it's interesting. You can read the transcripts and they're all kind of saying the same thing. But just when you're actually talking to them, the way they say it, it just feels like Taver Johnson thinks he's back.
Yeah.
And Greg Schiano, when he's talking about, it's in God's hands, that you certainly don't think that he's going to be back.
Yeah.
But it's like reading tea leaves. You're kind of interpreting body language and interpreting how they're acting when they're saying the same words that everyone else is saying.
Yeah, and Bill Davis said he would like to be back. Greg Stadrawa has said that he and Ryan Day have already talked about getting guys ready for the spring, so he expects to be back.
But what did he say? What else did he say?
Well, he also said he applied for the Bowling Green job and would have taken it if offered. He's played at Bowling Green. He's coached at Bowling Green. So he was looking around as well, because you don't know. And that's another thing he said. It's like Ryan Day is the head coach, and it's not about what you as an assistant coach, what's best for you. It's about what's best for the players. And that's ultimately up to the head coach, and he would have no problem with that, because this is the business they're in. No job is guaranteed forever. Almost everybody eventually gets fired by somebody. So Urban talked on what is today, Monday, about the transition, and said something about how it's easier when everybody comes, all of the assistant coaches come back. And he said something along those lines, and it got me thinking have they already talked? Have Urban and Ryan Day, are there any guarantees? And I don't think there are. But having that familiarity is a good thing, provided the coaches are getting the job done. That's why I expect. Let me see how to say this. Before we got here and Ryan Day was named head coach, I think we were talking about maybe 3 or 4 guys that we really expected to be back, maybe 3. For me now, I think that number is higher after talking to the coaches, unless Ryan Day is just a hell of a poker player and has everybody thinking they're going to be back. Although, even though they haven't really been talking too much about it, that's what all the coaches said. But they have been talking about it because they've talked about what they've talked about. So, are you more inclined to think there are more coaches than you initially thought?
I don't think there's any reason to think that fewer coaches are going to come back. Yeah. I think I was kind of right around 2.5 to 3 that I expected to change. And I'm probably, in the 2 to 2.5, maybe 3. I mean,
you've gone down to half a coach.
I'm willing to, I think that this is one of these things where it's there's a 80% chance this guy's gone, and a 90% chance this guy's gone, and a 60% chance that this guy's gone, but now maybe the 60% chance is a 40% chance. So now you're rounding down. It's just, I don't think that I have meaningfully changed my opinion on stuff. It's just you're just reading into slightly different. Yeah. When we were talking about Stud a week ago, we were reading into the fact that Ryan Day addressed the failures in offensive line recruiting, and they've missed 5 in-state offensive linemen in the last few years. Mm-hmm. And he said, we're aware of that and we're going to address the issue. Now, if you're the offensive line coach who's in charge of recruiting a lot of those guys, addressing the issue may be we need a new offensive line coach. But if Stud is talking about Day, talking to him about what they're going to do in the spring, then maybe that's not the case.
Why have that conversation?
Right. So, and I think there's also a possibility that some of the guys don't know yet. Either he legitimately, Ryan Day has very consistently said they're just focused on the Rose Bowl right now. They're not worried about it. I think he's probably thought about it, but I don't get the sense he's had a conversation with anyone that is, you are not going to be here next year.
And that would just be an uncomfortable situation in any walk of life, any job where you're telling somebody, you're not going to be here in 2 weeks, but I still need your best. Mm-hmm. Good luck with that. Yeah. It's best to, that's why you fire everybody on a Friday. You at least got that week of work out of them. So we'll see. I think there was also the videos of the coaching player, the coach switch thing in practice where the coaches would have to go through the drills, and the 3 coaches that OSU that either didn't do it or OSU didn't show videos of doing it were Stud, Bill Davis, and Greg Schiano. And so it's real easy to do that math. Greg did say, Schiano said he wants to be back, correct?
Yes. Yep.
He wants to be back. He has already talked to Ryan Day about it, but doesn't want to reveal what was said. So make of that what you will. I would, I've talked to somebody recently saying that Bill Davis gets a bad rap. That may be so, and maybe it's Greg Schiano's fault, but...
Was that person Bill Davis?
Yesterday I talked to Bill Davis. Maybe they just don't mesh, or Greg Schiano just needs to dial it down from the get-go. Because the defense gets better later on in the season after they've simplified things and stopped doing stuff that they're no good at. And maybe, Tom, if you just start that in the spring, and maybe you can just stay up here and then get better rather than doing this and then you come back up a little bit. It's 2 years in now, and Greg Schiano, and it's more than that, but these last 2 years, things have not been good. It was the worst defense arguably ever in Ohio State history this year. And it's not like things are fixed because they just gave up 50 points or whatever to Maryland, 39 to Michigan. I know there were some short fields there. We know he can do it because there was, he's done it, but the mix just isn't good right now. It isn't right now. And whether it's just time to cut bait on Greg Schiano, or you can't have Greg Schiano and Bill Davis together, or maybe Bill Davis is fine. You just have to put his linebackers in a position to succeed, which we know they weren't in for much of the season. And then also losing Nick Bosa we don't talk about it enough, I think. You lose the best player in America, the one where your defense is skewed towards that guy, and offenses are skewed towards that guy. And now you have to do something completely different, or you do things the same, but you don't have the same players there to make it work, and it just becomes messy. I think they just need a better plan of attack. Even if it's the same coaches, you have to change something.
Well, I think that, and we've talked about this, and I don't think we've talked about it in the podcast before, but the defense this year makes no sense until you think about the fact that they probably set it up in the summer planning on Nick Bosa being out there and Nick Bosa being a game-changing performer all by himself. So you have the linebackers up on the line, and at the time, the theory was from Greg Schiano that we want to have the linebackers up there so that the offensive line can't just focus on the defensive line. So you have those linebackers up there in order to keep Nick Bosa from getting triple teamed. Well, that's a great plan until Nick Bosa's out, and then all of a sudden that just gets your linebackers blocked, and then there's huge holes and they're out of position. And I think that the failure there is not the initial plan. The failure there is the failure to adapt after Nick Bosa left. Because normally, schematically, you use your linemen to occupy the blockers and keep your linebackers clean. Ohio State's doing it the opposite this year because they really had such a transcendent talent at defensive end. Yeah. And as soon as he's gone, there's a reason that the normal orthodoxy is use your line to keep your linebackers clean rather than the other way around. And as soon as that transcendent talent was gone, all of a sudden the plan didn't make a whole lot of sense, and they kept doing it for like a month and a half after that.
Yeah, and you had Chase Young playing on 2 sprained ankles at one point. We know Draymond Jones had a bad foot. Robert Landers had a bad foot. So this is a defensive line-focused team with a banged-up defensive line. So just by having everybody healthy and back, things should get better. The linebackers should get better. I wonder if coaches are retained, if people are just going to be like, what's the point? Ryan Day's first staff needs to have his touches. I think it needs to have his touch on it. It needs to be what he wants, not what Urban Meyer wants. I think that's what he'll get. But that's a tough ask for a new coach to, I guess, fire all of these loyal guys that he's worked with. But again, they weren't forced into this business. This isn't servitude. Mm-hmm. They chose to become a football coach. And Bill Davis, every 2 or 3 years, he's somewhere else. So he's experienced it as well. I would be pretty darn shocked if there are no changes. And maybe even a little disappointed in Ryan Day.
Yeah, I think that there is an idea that they want to have as much consistency from year to year, keep things rolling as much as they can from year to year as possible, but that doesn't mean 100% carryover. We've said in the past, you can't judge a guy based on 1 year. We talked about that with Bill Davis last year. We talked about that with Greg Schiano last year with some of the issues they had there. Now those guys have had 2 years. It's not just, are the linebackers, maybe it's the individual players. Maybe some of these guys just aren't focused enough or not paying attention or whatever. Now you've had 2 years, and it's okay. Well, last year maybe they weren't paying attention. This year maybe it's Schiano. Like, you can keep doing that, and you can keep coming up with reasons for things if you want to, and keep, well, maybe it'll be different next year, or maybe it's time to just try something different.
Try something new.
And there's as we're recording this, Cincinnati's playing their bowl game, and I don't know what their defensive coordinator may be available after this game. So that would be Marcus Freeman, former Ohio State linebacker, I am not the first person to say his name out loud in the context of the Ohio State coaching staff.
No, that's why I keep saying, like, I have heard nothing about him to Ohio State, but it just makes complete sense. We'll see if that happens. It's going to be interesting, like, how quickly some of this stuff starts happening. I'm terrified. Like, we'll fly back home, like, January 2nd. I don't know what time we leave, like, Ohio time, maybe, like,
4 in the afternoon.
4 in the afternoon, and get home at, like, midnight. Like, what are we going to run into? Like, what has happened in the time we're on the plane?
Well, while I was with Ryan Day yesterday, on Sunday, someone asked him, like, what his timetable was for making these decisions, and he didn't want to put anything firm on it. Like, it wasn't like, we're going to try and have everything done 24 hours after we get back or in the first week. He said they want to kind of take their time, think about it. So I don't anticipate January 2nd decisions, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. But that's based on what he said, that's not the timetable I would anticipate.
You know what would have been a good answer? If he would have said, let's see how the first half goes. Coach, what's your timetable? Well, let's see what that Washington offense does in the first half, and then I'll let you know.
He's not in charge yet. He doesn't get to fire people until that clock hits 0.
Fire him. If you don't, I will next week. We got anything else?
Well, one other storyline that's been kind of floating around this week is Thayer Munford.
Oh, yes.
Starting left tackle for Ohio State. He has not been practicing. He was not at Media Day on Sunday. Josh Alabi, and that is how you say his name. I have said that and Alabi at times. It is Josh Alabi.
I say Smith.
Yeah, well. He is talking to him. He sure was talking like he was going to play. Everyone has said Thayer Munford is a game time decision, but
that's what you say.
That's what you say when you don't want the other team to know. So I would anticipate, based on everything that we've seen and everything that we've heard, I think we would anticipate you're going to see Josh Alabi at left tackle, which sets up kind of a cool story, because Josh Alabi and Mike Weber were high school teammates at Cass Tech. They've played together since 9th grade in 2011. This is going to be Weber's last game. This could be Josh Alabi's first start. I asked both of them, how cool would it be? You're playing together in the Rose Bowl. Mike Weber goes off left tackle for a touchdown run to, in the last game of his career. And they both thought, it was like genuine, like that would be really cool. That would be a very, that'd be an awesome way to have their time as teammates come to an end.
I did like today during the coaches press conference, it was Urban Meyer and Chris Peterson. Chris Peterson, it was a question to both of them. Chris Peterson was asked about, having any trick plays that he plans on running in the game, and how Urban Meyer plans to defend those. And Urban said, let's let Chris go first. Let's get that answer. And, of course, Chris was like, no. Are you going to run some trick plays? No.
Big smile.
Yeah. So there will be some trick plays. That's just how things go. And I think we talked to, Tuff Borland a couple days ago, and he said you can't look for it. You can't wait for it. You can't focus on it. You just have to react to it. So expect some of those. I don't expect a lot of fireworks from Washington's offense, just because that's not who they are, which suits Ohio State's defense well. And I think we both agree that Buckeyes by a couple of touchdowns. It's a 6.5 point line. They should cover that. Don't bet. It's not safe. Don't gamble. It's a gamble. So I think we're good.
I think we're good.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for watching on Facebook. We will see you after the game, probably like 9:30, 10 p.m. Eastern.
Something like that. Maybe before that.
We'll see. Locker room.
Oh yeah,
game.
Eastern time. Sorry, I was thinking Pacific time. Yeah, 9 or 10 is probably about right.
So we'll see you all then. Thank you for listening. Thanks for watching.